Hare Krishna, Vanchakalpatrubhyascha, Kripasindubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. So welcome to our continuing reading of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chapter 5, today, the meeting of Nanda and Vasudeva. So I'm going to just chant a little mantra from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishna, 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 Hare. Krishna, 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 Hare. Krishna, 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 Rakshaman. Krishna, 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 Pahinam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshaman. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahinam. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Chapter 5, The Meeting of Nanda and Vasudeva. Although Krishna was the real son of Vasudeva and Devaki, because of Kamsa's atrocious activities, Vasudeva could not enjoy the birth ceremony of his son. But Nanda Maharaj, the foster father, celebrated the birthday ceremony of Krishna very joyfully. The next day it was declared that a male child had been born to Yashoda. According to Vedic custom, Nanda Maharaj called for learned astrologers and brahmanas to perform the birth ceremony. After the birth of a child, the astrologers calculate the moment of the birth and make a horoscope of the child's future life. Before the birth ceremony, the family members take baths, cleanse themselves, and decorate themselves with ornaments and nice garments. Then they come before the child and the astrologer to hear of the future life of the child. Nanda Maharaj and other members of the family dressed and sat down in front of the birthplace. All the brahmanas who were assembled there on this occasion chanted auspicious mantras according to the rituals, while the astrologers performed the birth ceremony. All the demigods are also worshipped on this occasion, as well as the forefathers of the family. Nanda Maharaj distributed to the brahmanas 200,000 cows, which were well decorated with cloth and ornaments. He gave the brahmanas not only cows in charity, but also hills of grain decorated with ornaments and golden bordered cloth. In the material world, we possess riches and wealth in many ways, but sometimes not in very honest and pious ways, because that is the nature of accumulating wealth. According to Vedic injunction, therefore, one should purify such wealth by giving cows and gold in charity to the Brahmanas. A newborn child is also purified by gifts of grains in charity to the Brahmanas. In this material world, it is to be understood that we are always living in a contaminated state. We therefore have to purify the duration of our lives, our possession of wealth, and ourself. We can purify our duration of life by taking a daily bath and cleansing the body, inside and out, and accepting the 10 kinds of purificatory processes. By austerities, by worship of the Lord, and by distribution of charity, we can purify the possession of wealth. We can purify ourselves by studying the Vedas in order to understand the absolute truth and achieve self-realization. It is therefore stated in the Vedic literature that by birth everyone is born a Shudra, that by accepting the purificatory processes one becomes twice born, that by studying the Vedas one becomes a Vipra, which is the preliminary qualification for becoming a Brahmana, and that when one perfectly understands the absolute truth, he becomes a Brahmana. And when the Brahmana reaches further perfection, he becomes a Vaishnava, or a devotee. In Krishna's birth ceremony, all the assembled Brahmanas began to chant different kinds of Vedic mantras to invoke all good fortune for the child. There are different kinds of chanting known as Sutta, Magadha, Vandi, and Virudavali. Along with this chanting of mantras and songs, bugles and kettle drums sounded outside the house. On this occasion, the joyous vibration could be heard in all the pasturing grounds and all the houses. Within and outside of the houses, there were varieties of artistic paintings done with rice pulp, and scented water was sprinkled everywhere, even on the roads and streets. Ceilings and roofs were decorated with different kinds of flags, festoons, and green leaves. The gates were made of green leaves and flowers. All the cows, bulls, and calves were smeared with a mixture of oil and turmeric and painted with minerals like red ochres, and were covered with nicely colored cloths and gold necklaces. When all the ecstatic cowherd men heard that Nanda Maharaj, the father of Krishna, was celebrating the birth ceremony of his son, they became spontaneously joyful. They dressed themselves with very costly garments and ornamented their bodies with different kinds of earrings and necklaces and wore great turbans on their heads. After dressing themselves in this gorgeous way, they took various kinds of presentations and thus approached the house of Nanda Maharaj. As soon as they heard that Mother Yasoda had given birth to a child, the cowherd women became overwhelmed with joy, and they also dressed themselves with various kinds of costly garments and ornaments and smeared scented cosmetics on their bodies. As the dust on the lotus flower exhibits the exquisite beauty of the flower, all the gopis, cowherd women, applied the dust of kumkuma on their lotus-like faces. These beautiful gopis took their different presentations and very soon reached the house of Maharaj Nanda. Overburdened with their heavy hips and swollen breasts, the gopis could not proceed very quickly toward the house of Nanda Maharaj. But out of ecstatic love for Krishna, they proceeded as quickly as possible. Their ears were decorated with pearl rings, their necks with jeweled lockets, their lips and eyes with different kinds of lipstick and ointment, and their hands with nice golden bangles. As they were very hastily passing over the stone road, the flower garlands which were decorating their bodies fell to the ground, and it appeared that a shower of flowers was falling from the sky. From the movement of the different kinds of ornaments on their bodies, they were looking still more beautiful. In this way, they all reached the house of Nanda Yashoda and blessed the child. "Dear child, you live long just to protect us." While they were blessing child Krishna in this way, they offered a mixture of turmeric powder, oil, yogurt, milk, and water. They sprinkled this mixture not only on the body of child Krishna, but on all other persons who were present there. Also, on that auspicious occasion, there were different bands of expert musicians playing. When the cowherd men saw the pastimes of the cowherd women, they became very joyful, and in response, they also began to throw yogurt, milk, clarified butter, and water upon the bodies of the gopis. Then both parties began to throw butter on each other's bodies. Nanda Maharaj was also very happy to see the pastimes of the cowherd men and women, and he became very liberal in giving charity to the different singers who were assembled there. Some singers were reciting great verses from the Upanishads and the Puranas. Some were glorifying the family ancestors, and some were singing very sweet songs. There were also many learned brahmanas present, and Nanda Maharaj, being very satisfied on this occasion, gave them different kinds of garments, ornaments, and cows in charity. It is very important to note in this connection how wealthy the inhabitants of Vrindavan were simply by raising cows. All the cowherd men belonged to the Vaishya community, and their business was to protect the cows and cultivate crops. By their dress and ornaments, and by their behavior, I lost my place. By their dress and ornaments, and by their behavior, it appears that although they were in a small village, they still were rich in material possessions. They possessed such an abundance of various kinds of milk products that they were throwing butter lavishly on each other's bodies without restriction. Their wealth was in milk, yogurt, clarified butter, and many other milk products, and by trading their agricultural products, they were rich in various kinds of jewelry, ornaments, and costly garments. Not only did they possess all these things, but they could give them away in charity lavishly, as did Nanda Maharaj. Thus Nanda Maharaj, the foster father of Lord Krishna, began to satisfy the desire of all the men assembled there. He respectfully received them and gave them in charity whatever they desired. The learned brahmanas, who had no other source of income, were completely dependent on the Vaishya community for their maintenance, and they received gifts on such festive occasions as birthdays and marriages. Because a brahmana, by statutory Vedic injunctions, simply live on charity. Prabhupada once said that a brahmana would come to a village, sit down, and because a brahmana could learn anything and teach anything, they would teach all the children. And he said in this way, and they wouldn't ask for any tuition. And he said in this way, India meant free education for everyone. But the parents would see, oh, this nice brahmana is teaching our children, here's some milk, here's some cloth, here's some... So they did not want for anything. That was the culture. And we'll continue. While Nanda Maharaj was worshipping Lord Vishnu on this occasion and was trying to satisfy all the people there, his only desire was that the newborn child Krishna would be happy. Nanda Maharaj had no knowledge that this child was the origin of Vishnu. He was praying to Lord Vishnu to protect him. Rohini Devi, the mother of Balaram, was the most fortunate wife of Vasudeva. She was away from her husband, yet just to congratulate Maharaj Nanda on the occasion of the birth ceremony of his son Krishna, she dressed herself very nicely, wearing a garland, a necklace, and other bodily ornaments. She appeared on the scene and moved hither and thither. According to the Vedic system, a woman whose husband is not at home does not dress herself very nicely. But although Rohini's husband was away, she still dressed herself very nicely on this occasion. From the opulence of the birth ceremony of Krishna, it is very clear that at that time Vrindavan was rich in every respect. Because Lord Krishna took birth in the house of King Nanda and Mother Yashoda, the goddess of fortune was obliged to manifest her opulences in Vrindavan. It appeared that Vrindavan had already become a site for the pastimes of the goddess of fortune. After the birth ceremony, Nanda Maharaj decided to go to Mathura to pay the annual tax to the government of Kamsa. Before leaving, he called for the able cowherd men of the village and asked them to take care of Vrindavan in his absence. When Nanda Maharaj arrived in Mathura, Vasudeva got the news and was very eager to congratulate his friend. He immediately went to the place where Nanda Maharaj was staying. When Nanda saw Vasudeva, he felt that he had regained his life. Nanda, overwhelmed with joy, immediately stood up and embraced Vasudeva. Vasudeva was received very warmly and offered a nice place to sit. Anxious about his two sons, who had been put under the protection of Nanda without Nanda's knowledge, Vasudeva inquired about them, that is, without the knowledge they were his two sons. Vasudeva inquired about them with great anxiety. Both Balaram and Krishna were the sons of Vasudeva. Balaram was transferred to the womb of Rohini, Vasudeva's own wife, but Rohini was kept under the protection of Nanda Maharaj. Krishna was personally delivered to Yasoda and exchanged for her daughter. Nanda Maharaj knew that Balaram was the son of Vasudeva, but he did not know that Krishna was also Vasudeva's son. Vasudeva, of course, was aware of this fact and inquired very eagerly about both Krishna and Balaram. Vasudeva then addressed Nanda. My dear brother, you were old and very anxious to beget a son, and yet you had none. Now, by the grace of the Lord, you are fortunate to have a very nice son. I think that this incident is very auspicious for you. Dear friend, I was imprisoned by Kamsa, and now I am released. Therefore, this is another birth for me. I had no hope of seeing you again, but by God's grace, I can see you. In this way, Vasudeva indirectly expressed his anxiety about Krishna. Krishna was sent incognito to the bed of Mother Yashoda, and after Nanda very pompously celebrated Krishna's birth ceremony, he went to Mathura. So Vasudeva was very much pleased and said, "This is a new birth for me." He never expected that Krishna would live because all his other sons had been killed by Kamsa. Vasudeva continued, "My dear friend, it is very difficult for us to live together. Although we have our family and relatives, sons and daughters, by nature's way we are generally separated from one another. The reason for this is that every living entity appears on this earth under different pressures of fruitive activities. Although they assemble together, there is no certainty of their remaining together for a long time." He's talking about karma. According to one's fruitive activities, one has to act differently and therefore be separated. For example, many plants and creepers are floating on the waves of the ocean. Sometimes they come together, and sometimes they separate forever. One plant goes one way, and another plant goes another. Similarly, our family assembly may be very nice while we are living together, but after some time, in the course of the waves of time, we are separated. The purport of this expression by Vasudeva is this: although he had 8 sons born in the womb of Devaki, unfortunately, they were all gone. He could not even keep his one son, Krishna, with him. Vasudeva was feeling his separation, but he could not express the real fact. "Please tell me about the welfare of Vrindavan," he said. "You have many animals. Are they happy? Are they getting sufficient grass and water? Please also let me know whether the place where you are now living is undisturbed and peaceful." This inquiry was made by Vasudeva because he was very anxious about Krishna's safety. He knew that Kamsa and his followers were trying to kill Krishna by sending various kinds of demons. They had already resolved that all children born within 10 days of the birthday of Krishna should be killed, everyone, all of them. Because Vasudeva was so anxious about Krishna, he inquired about the safety of his, that is Krishna's, residence. He also inquired about Balaram and his mother Rohini, who were entrusted to the care of Nanda Maharaj. Vasudeva also reminded Nanda Maharaj that Balaram did not know his real father. Quotation marks. "He knows you as his father, and now you have another child, Krishna, and I think you are taking very nice care of both of them." It is also significant that Vasudeva inquired about the welfare of Nanda Maharaj's animals. The animals, especially the cows, were protected in exactly the manner of one's children. Vasudeva was a Kshatriya, and Nanda Maharaj was a Vaishya. It is the duty of the Kshatriyas to give protection to the citizens, and is the duty of the Vaishyas to give protection to the cows. The cows are as important as the citizens, just as the human citizens should be given all kinds of protection, so the cows should also be given full protection. They have civil rights. That's the next civil rights movement. They're cows and actually other living beings. They're all praja, Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam. They're all citizens and all to be protected. Vasudeva continued to say that the maintenance of religious principles, economic development, and the satisfactory execution of meeting the demands of the senses depend on cooperation among relatives, nations, and all humanity. Therefore, it is everyone's duty to see that his fellow citizens and the cows are not put into difficulty. One should see to the peace and comfort of his fellow man and the animals. The development of religious principles, economic development, and sense gratification can then be achieved without difficulty. Vasudeva expressed his sorrow due to not being able to give protection to his own sons born of Devaki. He was thinking that religious principles, economic development, and the satisfaction of his senses were therefore all lost. Dharma, artha, kama, and then moksha. So dharma, artha, and kama. That's the list. On hearing this, Nanda Maharaj replied, "My dear Vasudeva, I know that you are very much aggrieved because the cruel king Kamsa has killed all your sons born of Devaki. Although the last child was a daughter, Kamsa could not kill her, and she has entered into the celestial planets. My dear friend, do not be aggrieved. We are all being controlled by our past unseen activities. Everyone is subjected to his past deeds, and one who is conversant with the philosophy of karma and its reactions is a man of knowledge. Such a person will not be aggrieved at any incident, happy or miserable." Vasudeva then replied, "My dear Nanda, if you have already paid the government taxes, then return soon to your place, because I think that there may be some disturbances in Gokula." Famous last words. After the friendly conversation between Nanda Maharaj and Vasudeva, Vasudeva returned to his home. Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men who had come to Mathura to pay their taxes also returned home. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 5th chapter of Krishna, the meeting of Nanda and Vasudeva.
Okay, so if anybody has any comments or questions or thoughts in general on today's reading, go ahead and type them into the chat box underneath the video. Just as we're waiting for some comments to come through, I was just reflecting on how what's going on right now is really emphasizing the wealth of what is real wealth, and cows and land, and that was being emphasized in this chapter as well. And also, as you're saying, of free education and that parents would say, "Oh, here's this person basically giving education to our children," and let's reciprocate with them. And I was just thinking, we think Varnashrama is not easy to implement in Kali Yuga, But I was just thinking that actually one way to at least assist varnashrama to happen in a healthy way is to recognize when to reciprocate. And I just think even in our own movement, there's so many classes being offered and so many things that we kind of just take as like, oh yeah, let me just tune in here, let me tune in there. And I certainly do that quite often, and then maybe not think about the reciprocation side of it as much. So
good point.
Kendra Prabhu's comment is, can we hear chapter 6? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Next week.
Oh, next week. Tune in.
Yeah, well, let's see. Chapter 6 is called...
Putin I killed.
Oh, yeah, Putana killed. This is the exciting part. Yep. We start to see the various, anyway. Putana killed.
Radhika Ramana Das says Hare Krishna, and Devadarana Devidasi says Dandavat, and we have quite a few people online, so
okay.
Everybody happy?
So tune in for the next episode. Putana killed.
Kula Pradeep Prabhu says, thank you, Gurudev, with a Anjali emoticon and a heart.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. I enjoy reading this. It's nice. It's actually, when you read it out loud, you can kind of pay more attention in some ways. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And next week, chapter 6. Stay tuned. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Krishna book ki jai.